당신 이름이 뭡니까?
Well, my name is Noble, family name, Denis, my given name.
Why life is so painful? Can we free from pain during our lives?
Very difficult question. I have no idea who I am. Femboli, quelquam intro is agiochoio. Hibunchoio? Well, what? You cannot be happy alone.
Yeah, we are going to start, Denis.
Okay, very good. We go and we do it. 갑시다.
Hello, Denis.
안녕하십니까. I am delighted to be able to talk to you, Jung, and to be invited to talk to the viewers of this prestigious Korean television program. I feel it's a great honor, and I hope we can interest the viewers in what our experience was.
Okay. Denis, how have you been?
Well, as you know, you and I have been friends for over 40 years, and I'm nearly 85 now.
Yeah.
Yet, I am still in great health doing this and that and the other.
Very good, very good.
So that's all very good. So the simple answer is 아주
Yeah, I think you look very healthy.
Jung. And health isn't just what we experience physically, after all. And particularly as a university professor, having the privilege of meeting young people all the time in lectures, seminars, tutorials, working with me in research, that's what keeps you young. And health depends as much on what we feel psychologically as well as our bodies having a good physiology and avoiding pathology. But this is a two-way process, isn't it? Our bodies depend upon our states of mind. And Korean people actually express this rather beautifully. 기분 좋아요. And I'm reminded of your great 19th century doctor, Lee Jima, the initiator of Sarsang traditional medicine. And he knew that when he developed Sarsang Korean medicine. It depends upon the mental state as well as on the body state. And I think that's a very important insight.
How about the COVID-19 pandemic in England these days?
The COVID-19 pandemic has been a real disaster here in the United Kingdom. It has been very bad, one of the worst in the world, with huge numbers of people being hospitalized and very large numbers of people dying. We still have something like 50,000 new cases every day. You people in Korea have managed the COVID situation vastly better than us. You were working hard to test and trace, to control the situation very early on. You've led the world in exactly how to deal with a pandemic like this.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yep.
And we are now still in a lot of difficulty. Now, that's relevant to what we're discussing because it is relevant to people's psychological health.
Right,
It's relevant particularly
Yeah,
to
yeah.
how friendship matters. So the pandemic has emphasized even more our experience in the Buddhist temples and what we learned there.
You challenged the conventional theory of the genetics through your book, The Music of Life, in 2006. You explained that DNA itself is not significant on its own. More important thing is interaction of various levels rather than DNA. The main ideas of systems biology are contrary to the well-known book, The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. I believe this book induced big argument in science world. What do you think?
I think it is the main argument in the science world today, and for several reasons. First of all, it is very obvious if you think about it. When you build a house, you build it with bricks or with stones or with cement blocks. That's not just dependent on the bricks alone. It's dependent upon the systems of interactions, which is why we sometimes call this kind of biology on a particular gene. It doesn't depend on any one or other of them being there. It's very clever. Most of the time, the physiology can manage with a different set of genes if it can't use the ones it normally uses. That's first what led me to challenge the selfish gene idea. There cannot be a direct connection between a gene and its function. Now, the criticism was very severe up from 2006 when that book appeared and 2016 when there was a major meeting at the prestigious Academy of Science in the United Kingdom, the Royal Society. I was subjected on social media to a lot of online abuse. And I use the word abuse very carefully. I was called a moron. That, for your viewers, means
that's a very sad.
And so on. And I was also told, well, Denis Noble is a very distinguished physiologist, but when it comes to talking about Richard Dawkins' book or talking about evolution, he's like an elephant in a great big famous potter's shop, you see, breaking everything up. Well, yes, I am breaking everything up because we need to change our view.
Actually, you and Richard Dawkins are scientifically quite a different side, but you and Richard are very strong ties, very close friendship.
In fact, was his examiner 50 odd years ago for his doctoral thesis because he was using mathematics in his study of the birds. I was brought in to be an examiner because I was well known to be mathematically inclined. Now, ever since then, although we fundamentally disagree, and we state in print on the nature of biology, we respect each other. I think his writing is superb. It's extremely convincing. And his debating skills in public, also very good. You can be friends with people even you strongly disagree with them. I've disagreed with many of our politicians, but I can still be friends in a personal sense. That's what's important.
Yeah. That's not easy things, but anyway, you are and Richard are good friend. So now let's move to the Buddhism story.
Yes.
You have been interested in Buddhism for more than 2 decades. You especially say the systems biology and the Buddhist idea have many similarities.
Actually, although it sounds complicated when people first raise the idea of no self, conditioned arising, those are the English words we use. You've got the Hansha for them. Actually, it's very simple. First of all, everything is interrelated. If you took my brain out and you disconnected it from my eyes, it would not see. If you disconnected it from my ears, it would not hear. If you disconnected it from my nose, it would not smell. If you disconnected it from the rest of the body, it would not feel, it would not touch. Then the question is, where is the self? Well, obviously, with the brain isolated, there is no self left. That's why I think it's so close to the no self concept of Buddhism. You cannot be happy alone. You need the interaction. So part of your mind is out there in the social life that you have.
I'm sure that many would be asking the question, what has brought you to Buddhism?
Well, there are two things, Jung. The two answers to that is, first of all, study. I'm an academic, I'm a professor, so I like learning. Through study as an academic and encountering two very, very seminal people in my understanding, first Richard Gombrich writing What the Buddha Thought, and Stephen Batchelor writing The Awakening of the West. But as I said, that's not the only reason that I've been fascinated by Buddhism. Probably the much more important reason is my own life experience. For very many years, my wife was not very well. That was largely a psychological problem. It was what we call various forms of depression. It's quite difficult to live with, but it got worse over the last roughly 10 years of her life, very, very much so. You know, anybody who's had to cope with Alzheimer, with depression, I have great sympathy for them. With relatives who have those kinds of difficulties. It's one of the major challenges of the world today, because the aging population is producing more of that kind of problem. Now, from knowing about the Buddhist tradition, I asked myself the question, is it worth trying their meditation techniques? I just went at about 6 o'clock in the evening for about an hour and a half to join the monks. What I began to learn is that you focus on something. Of course, the usual teaching will be focus first on your breath, your in and the out, and watch the rhythm of your breath. But that's only a beginning. You can focus on almost anything. It can be a candle flame. It can be the silence in the room, the silence of the monks meditating. And that's when you do it together, because it's very difficult to get that experience entirely on your own. The consequence of that, though, was that I found that I could face the day more easily. It doesn't remove the pain. It doesn't remove the anxiety. It makes it easier to manage it, easier to deal with. And there are many ways in which that is the case. And incidentally, people often ask the question, is meditation difficult? Well, no, it really isn't.
About a decade ago, I introduced the famous monk, Silla monk, Wanhyo, and his book, the eminent scholar monk, whom I respect. It seems that you are more into Wanhyo than I am.
Well, I don't
Yes,
know
yes,
about what you,
yes.
but I do have many books on him.
Yeah. I was really surprised to learn that you even learned Chinese character to understand the poems of Wonhyo. What made Wonhyo so fascinating you?
I came across this extraordinary poem. It's about 20 lines of Hancha, Chinese characters,
Right. Yeah.
and it explores the relationship in plants. We're dealing with now a different kind of living system, plants instead of an animal, but the same applies. They're made of cells, they have germ lines, they have eggs and so on. They're called spores, and their seeds are what produce the plant. The plant produces fruit. The fruit contains seeds. The seeds come out and start the whole process again. And of course, he fully realized this is a circular conditioned causality. It is everything determining itself and each other. Right. You cannot have the seed alone. You cannot have the fruit alone.
It's really beautifully written one. Yeah.
The seed is not in the fruit, but it is not only the fruit, and so it's difficult to summarize it properly. Now, the question of what I then did, and the reason for being concerned about the Hancha, is I'm always very cautious about translations. I found it online. And then I just laboriously, with huge dictionaries of Chinese characters, I worked through one by one through all the Chinese. You know, I then produced a kind of literal translation.
Let's go back to 2 years, the grand tour.
Yes, the grand tour of the temple.
Visiting Buddhist temples in Korea for the documentary filming feels like a dream for me. Most impressive thing for me was at Silsangsa Temple, Namon. Absolutely. That they live together in a community through their everyday life, rather than being confined by the boundaries of the religion. What's your impression at Silsang Temple?
Oh, sheer joy, Young. I felt so emotional about that visit. Noble Tsunim is an extraordinary monk. The problem I had was, would I find these people very philosophical, very remote, not really concerned with the problems of everyday life? That, incidentally, is a criticism that some people make of Buddhism. But that's not what we found. We found a man with a huge heart and a gift for friendship. Another part of that story at Silsang Sa, and it illustrates the point very well. There was a young boy in the temple, I would guess no older than about 12, and I don't know why he was there. As soon as he saw me in the temple grounds, he would run straight after me. And all he wanted to do was to sit down together on the floor and hold hands.
That's it.
Now, my Korean was very simple, and just a few greetings, you see, 안녕하세요 and 아주 좋아요. He would sort of smile and nod, and of course he had no English. But you see, the interesting thing is that simple process for him was healing. Just being able to hold hands like that. This was somebody who wanted warmth, human connection, and that's what Doba temple, Silsangsar was providing to people the warmth of human connection.
Yes.
And that's what impressed me. And therefore, when I was asked, at the end of the temple stay, Professor Noble, what do you feel about it all? Not just the visit to Silsangsar, but the other temples too. I said, it's like a homecoming. This is like something I've learnt about for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And now I find it in practice, the actual process by which a monk like Noble can end up giving people that warmth of connection and indeed encouraging it amongst others. You cannot be happy alone.
Yeah.
You cannot be happy. The way humans are social organisms, so are dogs, so are cats, so are many other organisms. I'm sure the whales in the sea know where each other is. They send message through hundreds of miles.
Right.
Everything is social, and the social connectedness is part of the health-giving process. And the temple stays showed that beautifully.
Yeah. We can talk about the Silsangsar experience endlessly.
I think we could.
There was a time limit. So what
exactly.
are other temples, very impressive experience during the temple stay?
Well, one of them for me, Jung, was the extraordinary experience of meeting John Quan Sunim.
Oh, yes.
John Quan, of course, is very famous even in the West. She has appeared on Chef's Table in New York. She's extremely famous for the fact that she is such a good vegetarian cook. And indeed, we had the pleasure of going to the forest where she kept her vegetable garden and being taught how to pull the leaves of plants without killing the plant, harvesting what we needed for a lunch together, and watched her, of course, proceed to do her cooking in the temple itself.
Oh, yes, yes. Most impressive to you must be.
Absolutely. These very nice round mushrooms that were first fried lightly in perilla oil.
Yes,
you can't
yes.
get perilla oil easily in the West, so many people use sesame oil, but it's a bit more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Perilla oil is more gentle.
Right.
And then what she did after frying the mushrooms, she would take some barley malt and spoon it over the mushrooms.
Yes.
It was absolutely stunning. I now cook mushrooms that way.
Yes, I know.
The other extraordinary experience was that in the last conversation with her, I put in a question that wasn't in the script. I said, well, could we hear you sing? And I remember looking, she was semi-smiling, but also looking very doubtful about this. So to encourage her, I sang a line of one of the oldest poems in the West, a great poem of the troubadours in the south of France.
Can you sing a song for us? Some Occitan song?
I'll tell you the song I used for convincing her to sing for us, to chant for us, was the most famous of the Occitan medieval songs. It's about 900 years old, and it's called the Destino, which means the poem in 6 verses and 6 lines. And it just tells of the nature of your heart and how it pours out. Lu fem voli quelcom intro, non poces pecescoi sendre ni unglo. Then he finishes at the end of the song with going, he calls it paradise. That's the equivalent, of course, of the Buddhist nirvana.
Buddhism, unexpected pain is often compared to arrows. No one can avoid the first arrow, but those with enlightenment are able to avoid the second arrow. Why life is so painful? Can we free from pain during our lives?
This is probably the deepest question, Jung, on this discussion. I don't think we can easily get rid of pain, but through meditation we can do something that is almost the same. We can make it less painful. The pain is still there, but it gets to be very much more bearable. You can cope better with it. That's what I found in the Oxford temple founded by the Thai monk Dhammasamai. He and his monks are just like Dobup in Silsangsar, were giving out their insights into the benefits of meditation to people. Just a few years ago, I contracted a very difficult and serious systemic infection. Some bacteria had got through my skin very deeply, doesn't matter what that was. But they also told me, we are going to have to deal with this, with the damage to your hand, in 3 successive operations.
Oh.
Now, I then thought, well, can I do it? I think, I said to the surgeon, would you allow me to be awake while the operations happen? Professor Noble, do you know what that means? And he said, well, what are you going to do while we do this operation? Because it's long. I said, well, I'm going to meditate. So it's a very successful operation. Operation, he put a question to me. He said, look, you were meditating. What were you meditating on? Well, he got the point. You have to have a focus for your meditation.
Yeah.
I could see what you were doing, so I was meditating on you operating. Well, there's an English expression for that. It's a very famous, almost Cockney phrase, core blimey. You cannot really be serious.
Yeah.
You were. I said, well, you can meditate on anything. You see, what it does, of course, and this is I think, the real, if there is a secret to meditation, it is whatever you meditate on, whether you meditate with eyes closed or not, whether you watch a beautiful scene or not, whether you like music or not, whether you like somebody carefully talking in a soothing way or just complete silence. Whatever you're doing, you're letting the focusing on whatever it is you're focused on to enable you to put the pain and the problems of the world at a distance. They still exist, but you don't feel them so much. It's as though...
But pain is still there. So what's degree of pains?
It's a feeling that if you were to rate the pain as, say, 9 out of 10 in a natural situation, it's as though it comes down to about 3 out of 10, which is a huge effect.
So you have been meditating for a long time to control your mind, and you have greatly benefited from meditation. What is meditation to you?
I think I discovered, when I attended the meditation sessions in the Oxford Buddhist Vihara, the Thai temple, I discovered something about myself, which I think is very interesting. I think I've been meditating all my life without knowing it. I thought back to being an 18-year-old boy at university in London, University College London. And because I was living in the south of London, University College London is in North London, I had a 1 hour cycle ride to
One
go
day.
both ways. 1 hour to reach University College London. I would leave University College London and arrive at my family home an hour later, and I would not remember, how did I pedal through the streets? I don't mean, well, of course I knew that I pedaled the cycle, but it happened almost automatically.
So you can meditate any place.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
And I think, therefore, there is a very major lesson for your viewers, which is that we shouldn't think that meditation can only be done with monks, can only be done in a beautiful temple.
That's not true, yeah.
It can be done, as John Quan Sunim showed us, it can be done while you're cooking.
Yeah.
I think the mental exercise of focusing and concentrating.
Yeah.
In fact, people have done experiments with brain scanning on these people in the United States, showing that their brain processes are changed by that extremely long experience of meditation.
Oh, yeah.
Their
yes.
brain processes that create the feeling of kindness towards people are actually improved.
But many people wonder, just the concentration automatically lead to meditation state, or it's a different state?
It's a different state, I think. It's a bit like the yin and the yang of something. Focusing and concentrating on one's work, for example, when you and I have a very difficult problem in science, we give all of our energy to trying to understand it. That is what I think that concentration is trying to do. But meditation is almost the opposite. It's almost as though you are trying not to concentrate.
I see.
It's what the Buddhists call letting go. You let your mind run freely. Now, what many people say is, but look, if I do that, all sorts of ideas come rushing in.
So that means emptying.
Letting your mind empty. Now, the problem people have with that is, but look, then everything rushes in, you see, whether I treated my wife correctly, whether I did the right thing by my brother, and so on and so forth. It can take half an hour to get to the point where you begin to feel, well, okay, that's not me anymore. That's out there. And that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for what we were taught in one of the meditation sessions during the temple tour was essentially that. The monk explaining, let go was actually roughly what he was saying. So I think they are almost polar opposites. They're both mental activities, certainly. They're almost the opposite of each other. That's why I call them the yin and the yang.
Right. People try to divide into friend and enemy. But in Buddhism, the question, who am I, is the answer with no self. If so, how can we find out true self? Maybe it is a difficult question.
Well, that is what I told the head of the Choge order at the beginning of our visit, because he asked me the question, you see. First of all, what is your name? So I decided I would use the Korean order. Well, my name is, first of all, Noble, family name, Denis, given name. And then he looked at me and there's his finger you see coming out, and what Professor Noble, if I took that name away from you, who are you then?
Yes.
I said, very difficult question. I have no idea who I am. But then he smiled, and the seriousness suddenly melted into this lovely smile. And he said, you know, it's good to be the kind of person who knows that there are things that he does not know. Now, that's quite difficult for scientists to get used to, but I think it's absolutely correct. The fact that the more, and we know this as scientists, the more we find out, the more new questions there are to ask about.
Yes.
Well, it never stops. And there's no reason to think that it ever will stop. There won't be a complete understanding. What I think is the deepest thought in Buddhism is learn to live with that. Learn to live with the fact that there can never be absolute certainty. If you are hit with a poisoned arrow, get the arrow out, get the poison out. Don't worry about who sent it. That comes later. Now, I think this was his way also of explaining we don't need to worry about deep metaphysics. What might be beyond the world we can know is, and that's the thing to deal with. That's what will make people live better lives, not great metaphysical thinking. Now, I thought that was a very deep insight from the head monk of the Jogye order.
Yeah. Well, there is an interesting Buddhist parable. Your favorite painting, Ten Oxhead, that describes the process for a cow searching insight. Who am I?
This is the famous ox herder parable, well known in Chinese and Korean Buddhism. I have a beautiful illustrated book. There's the young boy with his flute on his ox after he's found his ox. I think the insight here is that the parable needs to be interpreted that the ox is the boy trying to find himself.
That's right.
Of course, it's a parable about a boy who's lost his ox. But it's also saying when you find yourself, you realize that it's a no self because you are related to everyone else in your social environment. It doesn't exist just in you alone. If you want to look inside here to find the ox, it isn't there, the self, it's not there, it's in the social interactions. So it comes back at the end to the same statement as Do Boksunim made, which is you cannot be happy alone. You have to achieve happiness through social relationships.
What values should we try to pursue, and what kind of life should we live in modern world?
And our children are facing, I think, the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced. We will have to hope, first of all, that the world leaders can come to some degree of agreement on what needs to be done. And they need to do so with a sense of urgency, because we're on the wrong path at the moment with the climate change occurring far too rapidly. Now, whether we can do that or not is going to be a very important question. Now, why is it relevant to our discussion? It's relevant for this reason. It's not just humans that can be selfish, it's countries that can be selfish. The rich nations of the earth will have to help the poor nations of the earth to do what's necessary, because it's going to cost money to switch towards gentler ways of treating the environment. And it means a huge shift of funding.
Right.
Some of us living in rich countries, and Korea now is amongst one of the most economic successful ones. It wasn't like that when you came 40 years ago, but it is now.
That's right.
I think the richest group of nations in the world are going to have to be generous to the poorer nations. You compare the situation, let's say Korea, with the situation in a country like Bangladesh, which is one of the poorest countries in the world. The only way in which we can control the pandemic is to make sure that everybody gets to be in a situation where the pandemic is reduced to being manageable. And the same will apply to dealing with climate change. We will have to become less selfish, less concerned for ourselves and our own country, more concerned about the world as a whole, because no man is an island. Again, it comes back to no man is happy alone. I hope we can be non-self enough, non-selfish enough to benefit the world as a whole. It needs a coming together.
Yeah. How do you expect we can meet safely in future without COVID?
We probably will never have a world completely free of coronavirus.
Right.
We'll learn to live with it, I think. And now there is hope, because I think it has a lot of lessons to give us as physiologists. And I've been very excited to discover more and more about immunology during this pandemic. And in fact, one of the key people developing the Oxford AstraZeneca virus vaccine is one of my former students. He told me so.
Yes.
I approached him about it, and I felt I didn't know that he was one of my former students, but I felt very pleased that I had managed to be a professor teaching in physiology lectures, those who are now trying to save the world by producing the cheapest possible vaccine, which is what the Oxford AstraZeneca one is.
That is special. That's very special. Would you like to any the additional Buddhist philosophies and learnings you would like to share with more people? Some more.
Yes, that's a very interesting question, Jung. I would like to sum up what we've discussed in the following way. It seems to me that practicing Buddhist methods, and incidentally, you don't have to be a Buddhist in a technical sense to do that. You know, people who are Christians, Muslims, Hindus, or I don't know, Zoroastrians and whatever, you know, you can use these techniques whether or not. I mean, it's a very interesting aspect of Buddhism, which I remember also His Holiness the Dalai Lama insisting on very much in talks that I've been present at. We're not in competition with any religion. You know, it doesn't matter whether you think there's something up there or not. What matters is what you do down here on earth. Now, I think that's a very good approach. So I think the treasure that you and Korea as a whole has nurtured for nearly 2,000 years now, because Buddhism first entered Korea probably as early as the 3rd century, but it's getting on for 2,000 years in which you have nurtured this great tradition. It is full of insights. They don't compete with other religions. That's a very important for people to understand.
Yeah, I think so. That's right. How about your feeling about our discussion so far?
I'm very happy, first of all, to be having a great discussion with you again. It's just amazing. And to be able to do it as two friends that have kept their friendship for 40-something years.
So, do you want to have the second session of the tour of Buddhist temple?
Oh, of course. Oh, in my second life, I need to come back. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, there is an important temple that was missed out. Hei in Sa.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So now we have to finish our discussion, and I like to say goodbye.
Yes. Goodbye.
See you later.
Yes. We'll meet again.
With wine.
의견 있는 경제 채널 SBS 비즈